Americans do not want this. 4% of Americans supported Project 2025. Only 15% of Americans actually want to roll back the separation of church and state. 80% of Americans think separation of church and state is a fundamental American principle. 2/3 of Americans say you can be a good person regardless of what you believe about God. People want religious pluralism. They do not want what Trump is doing. 78% of Americans, that is a majority of Christians and a majority of conservatives, oppose the Commission on Anti-Christian Bias. Not because separation of church and state is the issue they think is most important in America. In fact, because it's not the most important issue to them. They care about the price of eggs, and the price of gas, and the price of homes. And the more we can keep the focus on the things that Trump is doing to try and paternalistically control what Americans believe, how or whether they pray, whether they genuflect to the institutions that have pledged the most loyalty to him, all that he's doing for that, and all that he's not doing on trying to bring the prices of consumer goods down and raise our wages, that's how people say, I was sold a bill of goods, I'm tired of this, I'm ready for something different. So we've got to keep the pressure up and point out the contradictions, point out the places where they're overreaching. And I will point out, the reason that Project 2025 was such a relentless attack, and one of the most potent attacks that got used on Donald Trump in the last election, was because of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus that we helped start. The Congressional Free Thought Caucus led the movement within the House Democratic Caucus to say Project 2025 is an issue, it's going to be unpopular, we need to talk about it as much as we can. Jared Huffman, at the time the one open atheist in Congress, was given the honor of chairing that task force and being the lead messenger. That's no small thing. I know a little bit about what happens when you come out as an atheist in Congress. And back in 2007, it meant when you were up for a committee chairmanship, they said, absolutely not, get out of here, we can't have an atheist chair a congressional committee. But we are seeing that the tide is turning because of the work that we've done over the years. And people like Jared Huffman, members of our community, are the ones who are out in front, yelling about these contradictions as loud as they can. So yes, don't stop talking about Project 2025. People hate it. Some people were convinced that Project 2025 wasn't going to get done. They bought Trump's lie that he was going to do it. If we prove to them that he is, it's not hard to prove because he's following it almost word for word, we will see people say, this is not what I signed up for. So that's our work, is to keep the pressure up and raise the salience of that. It's Paul.
How can chapters like ours attract young people?
That's a great question. And frankly, that's one of the things that we're trying to crack open. And truthfully, one of the things that we're thinking about doing is running a program where we scout out young people who we think have leadership potential in some of the big cities in America, help them start their own chapters, and then connect them to the chapters that already exist for collaboration, some mixers. Because right now, young people want to be part of the intergenerational community, but they don't want to be 5% of a room where the median age is 70. Right? That's the challenge. And so how do we help create parallel communities that can then come together? Important pieces. I think the other thing, frankly, and I don't mean to shoot myself in the foot because this is what allows me to go and see a lot of amazing places in the country, but I think the chapters that we've seen grow are the ones that have diversified beyond the lecture format. As Humanists of New Mexico has. I mean, this is a strong chapter relative to the size of the city, and part of it, I think, is because you guys have these events, but you have the book club, and the biking club, and the hiking club, and the going out and seeing plays club. So I think, creating spaces that are specifically for young people, diversity of events, and especially ones that are not necessarily lecture-based, and then, using the tools of new media to reach out to people, which I think, frankly, is our job, right? Like, we're launching a podcast, we're launching a TikTok, we're putting an online community on Discord with the idea that we can be the voice that brings in young people in the media they consume and gets them thinking, oh, well, gee, humanism, I hadn't heard about that before, that's interesting. And then we can say, oh, you want to meet some humanists in your area, they're pretty good people, come out to this meeting in Albuquerque. So that's part of our work and what y'all are contributing to. I saw a hand over here.
Yeah, I'm a former retired federal employee, and I'm kind of following on with Terry's comment about Project 2025. Has the Humanist Association thought about working at the executive branch level and looking at proposed rulemakings and commenting on those. And as an example, because those are really powerful, as an example, there was a proposal to remove the word harm from the Endangered Species Act regulations proposed by Fish and Wildlife Service and National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I used to work in that arena, and the removal of that word harm basically rolls back those regulations to say the only way that you trigger prohibition of take under ESA is by killing or capturing. Nothing about habitat, nothing. This just happened. They had 140,000 comments apparently, so that may be good news. Hopefully a lot of those are our folks. But anyway, that's kind of in the battles in the trenches, it's specifics, but is anyone watching what these agencies are proposing? Because that's law every much as the laws about our statutes.
Absolutely. So we've got a team that is watching the executive orders that come out, reviews them, figures out how we can respond to them, and generally what that often means is response to the partners, right? You know, if an order, specifically the order on environmental protection and changing the nature of the Endangered Species Act, that's something where we look to people like the League of Conservation Voters and we say, how do we get our people to sign on to what the League of Conservation Voters are doing? And those organizations look to us on things like protecting secular public schools, protecting freedom of thought, and protecting scientific integrity, which is a huge, huge, huge issue on Capitol Hill right now. So yes to monitoring executive orders and executive rulemaking, and we've got our office in DC, we've got 3 policy staff, and together they run a congressional caucus, and they're running bill introduction efforts in 5 states, and they run a PAC, and they get information out there, and so we have to make tough choices sometimes about what we can and can't do, but I think a fundamental commitment we have to have as humanists is protecting our planet, because we understand that supporting human life means also supporting all the things that sustain human life. Yes, Sylvia.
So how are you working with the media to ensure that the American Humanist Association gets in the news in general, and then whenever there is a triumph in the legal system, that we guys are given credit for this coming about?
I love it. No, we were just working on this week after our win in Ocala, Florida. I got quoted in the Christian Post. I got quoted in I forget what it's called, the Mormons, in their Mormon publication quoted me. So we've got a really, one of the first things I did when I came to the AHA is sort of revamped our press shop, because you're right, the first stage to bringing people into humanism is people hearing about humanism. People want to see how we're fighting for them, not just how we talk about ourselves. We hired, and people in here follow national politics. Who's heard of Ben Wickler? The MoveOn.org wonderkid who turned around the Wisconsin Democratic Party, ran Scott Walker out of office, and then flipped it for Joe Biden, the biggest flip in the country in 2020. We hired his comms director. So at the AHA as our communications director, someone who's got a great sense of press savvy, worked with Paul to help arrange a great interview on the New Mexico Public Radio, which is why so many people are here. So we're going to see, hopefully, the AHA, as I, get clips of me speaking places, and we build relationships with reporters, because these people are about 2 months into their job, remember? A lot more, but also, we need to compete outside of traditional media. People do not primarily, they don't get their news, they don't get their beliefs, their set of identity from CNN or MSNBC anymore. Not that I won't go on CNN or MSNBC. We are losing the fight dramatically in the podcast world on YouTube and TikTok, where young people, especially secular young men, are getting pulled into this underbelly of right-wing content creators. There is not enough work being done on our side of the fence to go into those communities and compete and talk to people in the mediums where they consume information, the mediums that they increasingly trust, for better and for worse. And so we're also going to be doing a lot of work in the new media space coming soon.
Do you think we'll lose the war for NPR?
Well, remember, NPR, I think only about 5% of its revenue is federal government grants. We have to remember that. It's still, I don't want to cut 5% of NPR's revenue. I think that would be a bad thing for NPR. And I also think it's important symbolism for the government to say, we support independent, fact-based journalism. But I do not see a world where NPR just goes under and we stop being able to listen to it. Maybe they would need to consolidate a few stations. Maybe it's, as we've seen with newspapers, maybe we, hedge on quality and quantity of reporting. But a lot of it is donations and consumer-based revenue. So I worry about losing a lot of things before I worry about losing NPR entirely. Yes.
I wanted to ask you, you talked about bringing in young people, but the one thing that I'm not seeing is diversity in this group. And one of the problems that I see, or I think I see, with diversity, especially with people who are African American, is the church is so important for so many people over generations. And we're talking about, well, we're atheists or we're agnostics. How do you bring in people who their support and their strength and their fellowship has largely come from the church?
Well, I think it's with a message that doesn't rely on us saying we're at war with the church as a first principle, right? A message that says humanism is about these values, self-determination for people, and protecting each other and our planet, and believing in human potential and human freedom, and that we will work with allies who support those things, even if we disagree on questions of the supernatural. I think that message consistently held brings people in more broadly. Talk to a few things that I think are really important that we're doing. One is that so much of what makes people feel interested, welcome, and included is language. You were alluding to this. How we talk about things matters. And we often try to make assumptions and live in the head of other people. We can't do that, right? But tell you a story. When I was working in the tech startup world, right, we were building an app to improve positive mental health for children. And we would talk about it sometimes using the term mental health. We were talking about it using the term I had learned when I was studying at Harvard for the kind of work we were doing, which was social emotional learning. And our client base was largely upper class white people. And we did, you're in a bad position when you're selling a product primarily to upper class white people because there are only so many of them. And so what we did was we went, as a humanist, I love data. We went out and we looked broadly at how parents, regardless of who they were talking about their aspirations and fears for their kids. And especially in immigrant communities and communities of color, they weren't using the term mental health. They weren't using the term social emotional learning. But what we found from doing national surveys and speaking with a bunch of people and having conversations is that there was one word that cut across race, age, gender, class, immigrant status for what parents wanted for their kids. It was confidence. Confidence is what they saw as the opposite of anxiety and depression. And when we started framing our work as helping teach kids confidence, that was when we were able to build a client base that was broad and diverse, where we saw growth from our product that was eventually acquired. And so that's the work we're doing at the AHA now. We have an incredible donor who's donated almost $200,000 worth of marketing services. He runs a marketing firm. And we're doing focus groups in a national survey. We're oversampling people of color. We're trying to build a diverse group of folks from around the US and asking people who we know are broadly not believing in God or not really sure about it, and broadly think that humans are all socially equal and we need to look out for each other, asking them, which of these phrases makes you more likely to say you're a humanist? Which of these things makes you more likely to want to join an atheist group? We are going to go out and get the data about how people talk about these values for themselves. And that is going to be important. Not just sitting in the comfort of language that is familiar, but reaching into the transcendence of language that connects. And the final thing is that I think organizations often try to solve this problem of how do we diversify by putting people of color temporarily in positions that are highly visible. And the truth is actually that if you want diversity in an organization, you need to be sharing power and decision making among a diverse group of people. So it is significant right now that for the first time in its history, the president and vice president of the American Humanist Association, my bosses, are black women. That matters because it can't just be about putting people in front of the camera. Ultimately, the rooms where we make decisions and where we hold power have to be diverse, because when everyone's priorities are represented there, that means the work of the organization is going to reflect all the people who should be in it. So that's how we're thinking about those issues. I do not have all the answers. I am more than open to suggestions, but it is a critical piece of our work. Yes, ma'am.
What can we do as individuals or as a chapter, either for little tiny bites, what can we do to help?
Open the door.
Favorite question. You know, I think we all, ultimately there are lots of things that we can do. Right now, the number one thing that I think people can do in the short term is, policy advocacy. We have got a bill steaming through the House of Representatives that not only would slash Medicaid and slash grocery aid to poor families, but they snuck in something at the last minute that they knew they couldn't pass on their own, which is a massive giveaway of billions of dollars of our tax money to religious private schools. There is an opportunity, if not to kill that bill entirely, because we know it passed the House by one vote right after a Democratic member of Congress died. But to get people, because we have plenty of Republicans who are on record saying they don't support school vouchers, who are lying to us right now as they vote for this bill, there's an opportunity to get the school voucher part potentially out of the bill. And at the AHA, we make it easy. AmericanHumanist.org, if you click on Action Center, we have a number of things. If you click on it, it takes you under 2 minutes to send a message to your member of Congress saying, this is important to me as a humanist, and this is what I expect you to support. So and I will say, I was just looking at the numbers with our team yesterday. This year, members of the AHA sent twice as many messages to Congress as they did in the same period the year before. So people are activated, they're speaking up, they are yelling. And by the way, again, if you are thinking about giving political donations to people who are on our side of the issues, I encourage you to consider giving that money through the Free Thought Equality PAC, so that it has triple impact and people who know that the humanist community is supporting that. Beyond that, talking about humanism. Humanists talk a lot, but we mostly talk to each other. And we know that the best remedy against prejudice is proximity. People are more likely to be tolerant of immigrants if their neighbor is an immigrant. People are more likely to be tolerant of gay people if their son is gay, or their nephew is gay, or their neighbor is gay. People are more likely to know what a humanist is if you tell them where you were this afternoon, or this morning, I guess. It's the afternoon and the time zone over. And so talking about humanism and talking about it in a way that emphasizes not who we disagree with, but what it does for us, the kind of power and purpose it makes us feel. Because ultimately, we build political power and we build cultural power by growing in numbers. And we grow in numbers when we find the many, many people who believe the same things we do. Because the idea that all people matter, people should have freedom of religion, these are not radical fringe beliefs few Americans hold. And then, when we can extend that to all the people who are looking for something to be a part of, it's always good. The other thing is, there are so many ways to propagate and promote humanism. One way that's really interesting, a lot of people don't know about this. We certify hundreds around the country, hundreds of people, we call them humanist celebrants, who can perform weddings. They legally have the same power as any religious person does because humanism has legal standing as a religion. If you know of someone who's planning their wedding, Humanist UK, the British humanist group, will tell you the biggest way they grow is by people finding out about humanism through their wedding officiant business, because they're looking for someone to perform a secular wedding legally, and they find a humanist celebrant. So tell people about opportunities, leave copies of the magazine out, suggest to people they can work with a humanist celebrant on their wedding, and finally, this machine runs on money. That's ultimately, money is still the currency of American politics. We are able to do all this good work, the legal work, the political work, educating the humanist celebrants and the humanist chaplains, dozens of them who serve in hospitals and college campuses across the country, helping humanists wrestling with death. and the support that we provide to the local chapter groups. We do it with a team of 17, and we have to pay them living wages, and these are people who are working nights and weekends in support of the cause, and so if there is more that you can do, we are, and especially if anyone knows any billionaires, or if you are already contributing and you have friends who are saying, where can I make a difference right now? Where can I got $100 to give this month, who should I give it to that is pushing back hard and effectively against Trump? We do a hell of a lot with little. So those are a number of things that I would be grateful if anyone in the audience thought were worth doing. All right, any other questions? Or are we tired of me? No, I'm ready for lunch, I'm good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, one last one.
Our local group has special interest groups within it.
Yep.
So I was wondering if you have any suggestions for groups that we should have, maybe unusual or.
Oh, great. So you're just asking me to list my special interests. I mean, I have long believed that, and we're going to try and start testing some of these online. Anyone here know people who play Dungeons and Dragons? Anyone who play
Yeah,
Dungeons
yeah.
and Dragons? A lot of middle-aged humanist nerds love Dungeons and Dragons. I like Dungeons and Dragons. So we're trying to start some of those online. I personally, I loved hearing that you guys had a theater group. We moved to Annapolis, Maryland from DC because it has the largest number of community theater troops per capita in the country. And I also think that one of the things that I like is that you guys have a discussion group about current events. I think people like to be able to workshop their ideas and be heard. And then as folks know, I am an inveterate stand-up comic. And so if anyone wants to get a humanist stand-up comedy show together on Zoom, and there's another humanist stand-up comedians, I'm here for it. Thank you folks, it was such a pleasure to be here. I'm gonna stick around. And we all have one. Thank you for
Okay, so you want to talk about lunch first or?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So we want to thank Fish for coming to the land of enchantment where magic happens. And we have, you're now part of the club, large or extra large?
Large, please.
Okay, all right. One of our t-shirts. And we'd also like to present Fish our highest make-believe honor. It's, this certificate entitles Fish to heathen salvation.
Thank you, I'm lost in the blood.
As I mentioned at the beginning, we do 3 Saturdays every month. It will be at the International District Library on June 14th, which we have next meeting. And you can check out our website, humanistsnm.org, for the specifics on all of that. We also have a